Welcome to the Harvestworks live streaming event series. My name is Carol Parkinson, and I'm the director of our nonprofit Digital Media Arts Center in New York City. Our collaboration with Experimental Intermedia continues with our 7th Zoom-in OLAP, also known as our OnLive Live Art Performance Community Discussion Forum. For this event, we have the Experimental Sound Studio to talk about their quarantine concerts, an online streaming hub created in March 2020 with the goal of providing a centralized generative space for sharing work, connecting with community, and maintaining a culture of supporting the arts. It's great to have the TQC team here today: Kim Alpert, Alex Iglesian, and Daniel Weich. Following a presentation by the team and a Q&A from you, the audience, the forum will be open to anyone who would like to discuss online live art performance ideas or projects, as well as any technical or conceptual concerns. For a bit about the artist, I will hand it to Kim Alpert, who will introduce the TQC team and share some thoughts about its development. And Katherine Liberovskaya of Experimental Intermedia, an intermedia artist and curator, will introduce the series and moderate the forum. So let's get started. Thank you for coming.
So for anyone who's here for the first time, just a couple of words about the series. I think a lot of you have come to other meetings, but so this was started in January, and it's a community discussion forum for sharing and especially rethinking live online performance, because there's so much of it going on and so much of it is so boring, with people just turning on their laptops and not even paying attention to lighting. And so it felt like an important time, because, and especially like yesterday, we just had this meeting with people all over Europe who are still in lockdown. So this is going to continue, and I think it's really important. We think, Carol and I and other people who've joined, that it's really important to rethink it and to think of ways of making it the most interesting, the most effective, and not like what we hear a lot is like, oh, it's not like live. No, it's not like live. It's different. And so this is what we're here to talk about. So without further ado, Kim Alpert.
Hello. So I'm Kim Alpert, and I'm on the board for Experimental Sound Studio in Chicago. I've been a board member for about 5-6 years, and have been working in a marketing and strategy capacity really intensely in the past year with the volume of work that we've been doing online. My background is in digital media and experimental analog and digital video artwork, both in performing and gallery contexts. And I'm very excited about this project and getting to catch up and talk with Alex and Dan today. I'm going to introduce each of them and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. I'll start with Alex Iglesian. He's the lead engineer and one of the co-directors at ESS.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, as Kim mentioned, I've been at ESS since I think around 2007, so it's been a while, and have been lucky enough to be a part of the organization's growth and be a part of its a lot of change over the years in terms of expanding our reach with working with different artists and organizations all around the world. So it's been really wonderful. I'm excited to share that with you. My own work, I'm an electronic musician, recording engineer, sound designer, and professor as well. So yeah, looking forward to digging into this stuff. Thank you very much.
And we also have with us today Daniel Weich, who is one of the presenters and performers who's been with the Quarantine Concerts since its inception.
Hi, and thank you for having me as well. My name is Daniel Weich. I was initially, I'm a curator, guitarist, composer, improviser, mostly based in Chicago. I was initially involved primarily with a different Chicago organization called Elastic Arts, which I'm still very heavily involved in. And once the pandemic started, I was sort of publicly exploring ways of doing online performances, both for some of the artists that I was working with and for myself. And the ESS team, Olivia, Janelle specifically reached out to me to sort of see if we could join forces and kind of put all our resources together. And I've been working with ESS on this project for the last year. Was a friend of the space beforehand, had performed there and done a few things, but never really in the same kind of capacity. So it was a really fun way also to work with friends and people I admire a lot.
Awesome. So we have a very kind of short 10-minute documentary that was put together for The Wire from the Scrubbers Media Group. And one of the things that's really interesting, I think this came out in like maybe June. It was pretty early. So one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about initially is just getting some reflections from Alex and from Dan. Now that there's been another year, I think when we did this doc, we were all very hopeful that like maybe we'd be doing this through the summer, but nobody really understood the time and the impact that this was going to have. Alex, please roll a clip.
I had a tour booked for March for a release and everything got canceled. And I was trying to figure out the best way to stream it, where I would just play shows in my house, like a quarantine tour.
I was playing a show, playing my last show ever, maybe? The shelter in place was happening because he announced it that morning.
Unchecked, cases in Illinois will rise rapidly. I don't come to this decision easily.
Everybody at the venue was just like, this is the last time we're hanging out for like the foreseeable future. I think I even said, we're gonna have the quarantine concerts or something.
At ESS, we've been streaming our Monday night concert series called Option for the past 4 years. But then like within a day, the world changed again. And it all of a sudden felt unsafe and irresponsible to even meet like one-on-one.
I've been thankful to have been quarantined with 2 violas.
It just felt like this moment where everyone was having an immediate reaction. The best thing that we could do is all try to come together as organizers.
All of a sudden, every artist we know freaking out about money and income, and they've lost shows and opportunities. So it's like, how do we do it?
Each night, 100% of the donations made by the audience go to the artists.
I think that this idea was out there with a lot of people, and it was about like who could bring a full community, not just a home concert.
Let's make a quarantine day. Let's go have fun. Out the window.
And I think in hindsight, we really made the right move in terms of making it inclusive and inviting other curators and organizations.
I think it just turned into a whole series on its own. You know, at this point, I think we have an audience where people are just like, I'm just going to watch this because I know something will be on later, and everybody thinks it'll be good.
People think that we're controlling it. They think that we're somehow running the show. It's really us preparing the artists, and then we're just like sitting here crossing our fingers.
I don't know what's going on. We did a sound check yesterday, and it totally worked, and I did everything the same way today, and it didn't. And I guess that's just...
There have been other people who have leaned into the crappy video quality that they have.
Like if you take Corbett versus Dempsey's first Sequester Fest, Ardo Lindsay gets up there and his camera is sideways. And so we're watching half the set sideways, and then he figures it out. And he flips it, and
Oh, did you hear me?
that it ends up being such an addition to the charm of it all, really. We also have the chat going. It's like you're at a show, but you can read everyone's thoughts. It's even like more fun in a lot of ways. As artists start to do this more and more, they're realizing there are certain things I can do here that I can't do in a live setting.
Really intentional shots of like hands or instruments, which is super cool.
When you had a stay-at-home order issued by Democrats and now Governor Santos in Florida, is going
The fact that it's not amplified music live in front of an audience leads artists to experimenting with sound in a different way. Alejandro's set, I could not see that working as an amplified set in a venue, you know? There's something about this format where that was perfect for it.
That was so mesmerizing. Two of the first sets we had were like people thinking about this medium on like a whole nother level.
There's something almost like more intimate about the experience as an audience member.
People's domestic spaces or rehearsal spaces or the unintentional window into that. I think people are being very generous and just having that kind of like vulnerability and openness. Dave Rampus is a great example of just being super honest with the audience.
I have to say, this is an incredibly bizarre experience playing music over the internet to a very small broom closet full of nobody. I really appreciate everybody being here, and without this, you know, I don't know what we'd be doing right now.
I've heard that bells are healing. I figure why not believe that.
I'm streaming here from the epicenter of this coronavirus situation, and there's a lot of suffering happening.
Today was supposed to be my senior composition recital, which was obviously canceled.
The music that I'm drawn to at this moment is music of mourning.
That whole community is an energy out there that needed to go somewhere.
We're seeing bigger audience numbers than we've ever have before. We almost hit 1,000 for one show.
I mean, the truth is, the audience, like in the entire world for experimental music, is pretty small. We have 70 people at a show on this as a minimum. And ESS, it's like outside your fire code, right? I mean,
I think it's like totally transformed my idea of experimental music community. This last month has been very much shaped by this project, and I can't really imagine where my brain space would be without it. The outlook would be more bleak.
What does it mean to be a venue and to have a stage?
it's the most honest display of how large our scene is and how supportive our scene is and how talented it is.
It's strange to feel like we're all in a smaller space than we were, or like more, it's easier to see everything because it's all happening like right here. It's a very generative space to be in right now, which is weird.
Amazing. It gets me very emotional every time I watch it. It's kind of it's one of those really difficult things. So I wanted to kind of open and say where I was at when I was first called or emailed about this project, and then kind of let it kind of track back to Alex and to Dan from there. I think it's really important to honor the intention and the seed of something like this that has grown. Just in terms of context, I think we've hit over $90,000 directly to artists so far, and are well into over 100,000 viewers on Twitch, which are numbers for the type of music and sound that we're into. Is a hard thing to all get in the same place, and I think we all kind of knew that this community existed in this disparate way in, small clubs and bars and cafes and libraries and museums all over the world. But being able to actually connect them has a lot to do with the intention and the seed and the timing. So I know I had attended, I'm a graduate of Full Sail University, and had attended an event on campus and was coming back from Florida to Chicago as things were locking down. And I remember getting an email from the director saying, hey, we want to do this quarantine concerts because we think, this is, we got to pivot. We got to do a thing. Can you mock up a logo right quick? We got to go. And I was like, yeah, no problem. It's March 9th. Like, yeah, let me just send you something real quick. We'll see, we can use it. And I'd love to hear from Alex kind of what that conversation was like internally to pivot and to start doing that. And a little bit of the history of ESS and streaming, I think, is important in that context.
Yeah, I think, well, we had experience with streaming. Like I think I mentioned in the doc, it was about 4 years ago when we started experimenting with trying to present one of our concert series, which we call Option, to a larger audience. And we actually started with an FM broadcast. We have, when ESS first started, there was a pirate radio, and we had a little FM broadcaster and an antenna on top of our building, and we would do programming around that. And we sort of resurrected it after a handful of years and tried to use it again to begin to broadcast our Option series. That was about 5 years ago at this point. And then that, of course, shifted to, okay, how can we now improve this? How can we get this online? Invest in some cameras, learn about streaming equipment and platforms. And it slowly built and became this really wonderful way to kind of expand out of our space. And so we had a wonderful connection with it, and also realized that it kind of forced us to create a archive too. So we started to realize, regardless of how many people were viewing this thing virtually, we were creating this archive over the years. And that's one of the most powerful things I feel coming out of this pandemic, and looking back at the quarantine concerts, feeling really proud of this collection, this picture of experimental music in this time, and beautiful documentation from it. But I think back to your point, Kim, how this all started, like we mentioned in the doc, we started hearing from our community, hearing from all the musicians we know. I remember this moment where Olivia and I were sitting at our work table at the studio, like we do every week, writing emails and talking about programming and working out things. And, I was posting something on Facebook or Instagram, and there was just a flood of comments from musicians saying, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. Where's my income going to come from? I just had like a year of tours canceled in one moment after I've been planning this for a long time." And there was this like sense of panic and desperation within everyone we feel like we are supposed to be supporting. And one of the main goals of ESS and in our mission is to support artists, not only in terms of giving them a platform and an audience, but also financially as much as possible too. And our brains just like clicked into gear, like, okay, how can we pivot to what we love to do and we feel like is our duty to this community? How can we do it now with these restrictions that are just sort of like avalanching down on everybody? So we just like got into gear in a way, and brought folks like Daniel and our friend Ben Billington on board, because we were communicating similar sentiments in social media, and we're like, let's put our heads together and make this happen. And because of our history with streaming, and because of the fact that we had the resources to spend all of our time on developing a platform and a way to connect musicians and get them online and teach them how to do all these things, we were able to jump off like pretty much immediately after the lockdown. And looking back, seeing other organizations, even much larger organizations, were paralyzed. A lot of organizations just stopped what they were doing for like months, trying to figure out what their next step was. And I think we just felt this need to do it immediately. And I think that was kind of one of the reasons why it was such a success, because not only the musicians needed it, but the audiences immediately had this void that needed to be filled with experiencing something live, being with other like-minded humans and communicating with them, even though now it's in a chat room instead of at a bar with a beer in your hand. But we were able to just make that happen immediately, and it was a really wonderful thing, I think, for everybody. Just to add to one more thing, it was one thing we were seeing a lot of was musicians doing their own live streams within their own platforms, which was a beautiful thing. And that was like an immediate reactionary response, I think, from a lot of the community. You'll see these posts: come to my Instagram page and watch my Instagram live, come to my Facebook page and watch my Facebook live, and here's my Venmo account, if you want to support me. And that's great. But the way sort of I saw that stepping back was having this almost diluting what could be, right? All these musicians were essentially having their own house concerts, and their reach was only their friends. Financially, I'm not sure they were doing well either, because it was just their friends who were donating. So that was another thing where we stepped back and we were like, how can we help them expand the audience? How can we help them receive donations from people that aren't just their friends, because we've already had this infrastructure of paying artists too. So we just integrated that. I think the financial side of it was really powerful too, because that was kind of one of our goals, is to try to keep them supported in that sense.
I love that one. I think that speaks to one of the nimble things about ESS as an organization too. There's not like a lot of approvals when the directors are like, we love this, we care about it, we believe in it. The board is always like, okay, great, let's go. What do you need? What can we do? I'd love, to hear from Dan a little bit, the involvement of all the other organizations and talking with presenters. I know personally you had a whole tour planned, and there were so many people in that similar position. You know, the reach that this had was, you know, to know short to say that, like, you know, folks connecting into their personal networks to help build that up. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah. So I mean, Alex touched on a lot of stuff that was really important to me also when this first started. But I was sort of working on two big projects with ElasticArts. Well, one with ElasticArts, one just on my own before this started. One was that I was about to go on a tour. First tour I'd been on in a while. I'd just been busy with work and things like that. The other was that at Elastic, we've been working with Stefan Moore to install this cleat system of 16-channel omnidirectional speaker system, the same one that used to be at Issue Project Room in New York, the kind of next generation. He had approached us a year before, and that had been my main project. So we're working with him and his team to kind of get the speakers in, and we had an entire spring season of programming, and we got 2 shows off, and the third one was coming up, and all that kind of came crashing, and I was getting tour cancellations and things like that. And so I think we have a very industrious scene and community in Chicago. So I know that, and elsewhere as well, but just the people that we're connected to, we're immediately talking about like, all right, so this is a new situation. How can we deal with it? I was sort of lucky at the time to basically have just been in contact with a lot of other curators in other cities, you know, New York, DC, sort of places in Ohio, like where, you know, a lot of Philly, Baltimore, you know, Boston and so on, just because we'd been talking anyway about playing shows and things like that. And a lot of people had reached out to us about coming into town and using the cleat system. So it's a kind of, you know, already because of the curation and touring stuff, like just in touch with a lot of people, but was already having certain conversations and was able to essentially pivot those once this got running. But I basically was like, all right, so I need to change a few things. I still want to do this tour because I had this release coming out. I was lucky enough to actually be living in a recording studio at the time. So I had an entire live room and a lot of resources that I was very lucky to just have. Had some bad neighbors, which was a bit of a problem, but I was like, well, maybe I'll go on a little tour on my own from my house and I'll live stream myself. But I saw exactly what Alex was seeing. And I was watching a lot of our friends just perform on their Facebook Live or on Instagram or whatever and really enjoying it. And I had a few friends, like people that I really admired who had been pretty active Instagram live users anyway. And I was like, okay, I see, you know, so-and-so doing this, doesn't seem that hard, but how do we up the quality? What's the best platform? And so on. And I had like a couple of major, I mean, I actually should go back and archive these Facebook threads because it was hundreds of comments by people from all over, not just Chicago, but around the sort of experimental community talking about like working out the technical stuff. I'd never done this before. You know, I'd never streamed anything. I didn't know what any of the software was called. I had never really been, you know, I was trying to figure out if I could send it to multiple platforms. I'd never looked at Twitch in my life. I thought it was stupid, you know, and so on. And then Olivia Janelle from ESS, I guess, and Alex saw my thread and we're like, let's get together on this and stuff. And so we kind of gave ourselves a crash course in all the software, hardware stuff, all these other concerns. And between the day Olivia kind of reached out to me, I think in our first sort of test run, it was like a week. So we spent that 1 week, like every single day meetings with each other, just kind of like figuring stuff out. Technical stuff was especially big, but then also our main goal was to not be the ones curating all these shows, right? There was so much interest that we thought, we know so many people who are so good at putting on bills and things like this. And obviously putting on a good bill is really good for everybody. So if you just have one person streaming, like, okay, their friends show up, but if we get a nice, just like in any venue, you get a nice bigger headliner or something, or a good group that has a built-in audience, then lots of people are going to come. So we kind of just were trying to apply that idea to the online context. And then, you know, I had a show booked at Rhizome in DC, and then I reached out to them and I said, you guys should you want to do one of our nights? And I think they did like 2 or 3 actually in the long run, other organizations in other cities and things like that. So that was actually one of the most exciting things, was having an audience that was not only all over the country, but all over the world, but but also working, like kind of giving other venues and other people like space in our platform and kind of working together in that way was a really new thing, I think, for all of us. Like clearly we collaborate with other venues and people and stuff, but this was like a very new way of doing that. And it was one of the most exciting things, I thought. I don't know if that answers the question though.
No, it does in a really delicious way, actually. You know, it's one of those things, I think, when the world was open, you know, as an organization, we're so focused on our programming, on, you know, on our taking care of, you know, what we have to do, getting our grants in, getting our donors set, doing our gala every year, and you have this kind of churn, right? And, you know, there isn't that time out to, you know, connect with another organization that's similar and talk to them about how they're doing things and why they're doing things and how you can cross-pollinate audiences. So I think as artists, you visit and see all these different places on tour, you know, and even as an audience member, you know, like if I'm in Berlin, I'm going to go to so I'm going to, you know, go to the places that have the programming that I like, to actually virtualize the ability to be together. I think showed so much of how that audience is contiguous across all these different organizations, across all these different cities internationally. One of the things that I want to touch on, because when was, Alex, do you remember the date of the first show? Is it March
20th?
March 14th? March 20th?
March 20, yeah.
March 20th.
God, it is crazy.
Yeah.
I told Alex earlier that looking at the video of him that he looks like 10 years older to me now than
I feel
like
10 years older.
that video. He also is a newborn, so he's aging like three years for every year right now. One of the things that's really interesting, our first night with the quarantine concerts was still on YouTube. And that was one of those very early, I know, we don't like to talk about it.
No, we do like to talk about it because it's really interesting, actually. What happened is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think like the more contentious kind of stuff internally was like, which platform do we go with, you know? And Twitch was so, you know, a year plus ago, so steeped in that gamer community, right? It had all the mechanics that we wanted, but none of the audience that made sense. And, you know, at the same time, YouTube is so proliferated. There's so much content and so much garbage and so much paid media that it has already commercialized itself to death, where, you know, Twitch hadn't been owned by Amazon for very long. So there was just starting to even have pre-roll ads and things like that. So I'd love for you guys to talk about how, just like going through the platform change, because it was a pretty funny memory for me.
That first night, I will say, between Ben Billington, who was also helping Alex and I, we were more exhausted at the end of it than we would be running a normal live show, doing sound, doing the door and stuff like that. We were all completely done. It was so hard. It was so stressful.
Yeah, we had, you know, we went for YouTube initially, thinking that that's, you know, everyone's already part of the Google sphere and has an account, and it would be the most accessible, and it's what we've been streaming to before. I've never used Twitch or other platforms, so it just made sense. And the way that we worked it out is we would distribute something called an RTMP stream key to artists that allowed them to access our YouTube page. And something happened where we kept just getting flagged for inappropriate content, and our streams would be kicked offline. Constantly. And I think it had, just constantly. This was the first night, and it was just happening in real time. And we had I don't remember what the audience numbers were, but they were
large. It was a big number.
Yeah. I would say like at least 100 people were watching.
At least 100, yeah.
And they kept going offline, and I kept getting these notes flagged for inappropriate content. And, you know, in the end, I think it had something to do with like multiple sources trying to initiate streams, and YouTube has this feature where you have to specify whether their content is made for children or not. And if it's not, you have to tell them specifically this is not made for children. And I think it ultimately had something to do with that, because of the way we were trying to access the stream, that we weren't able to specify each time they would go online. So anyway, in the moment, all the artists and me in the background with tech, Dan and Ben on communication, we just were like, let's just move to Twitch. I literally signed up for Twitch like in 5 minutes, figured out how to get the stream key for that. We distributed it to all the artists. We told everybody in the chat room, and we barely lost one person. Like hundreds of people shifted over to Twitch with us to continue the show.
It was like we picked up an entire show and moved to a venue like across town or something like that, and everybody came. People were also, I think one of the sort of strongest memories of that moment for me, especially aside from just how hard it was, is how kind everybody was. No one in the chat was like, what's wrong? How don't you guys know what you're doing? None of that. It was like, don't worry, you guys are doing great, like saying such sweet things to the artists. It was Molly Jones, right? Was performing in Alejandro Acierto. And people were just like, don't worry, Molly, don't worry, Alejandro, like, it's great, you're doing great. And I felt so bad because they had kept starting and stopping, and people were unbelievably understanding and kind. You don't expect that on the internet, to be honest with you. You'd expect people to be like, you amateurs, don't you know what you're doing? Whatever the kinds of things people say to people online. But we got none of that night, and it was And then we were like, I guess this is where we're staying. We're sticking to Twitch. And it really was this foreign place for all of us. Except for Kim.
Yeah. The emojis were weird. Like, I still don't understand what the emojis are intended for, in some of them at least. The interface was really strange. But
it's definitely not our aesthetic, I think, in general, the way it looks, the color schemes, but it just worked, and the infrastructure was there. And what's really great about it in the end, if we can kind of later we can get into some of the technical nitty-gritty if we want to, but Twitch acts more as like a TV channel, so we can maintain a single stream key that we can distribute to artists, and they can just pop on according to a schedule. We queue them via text messages or emails. So it's one source that people can just constantly stream to and take turns. Whereas with YouTube, you kind of have to schedule a stream that has its own URL. And each concert has its own location within the YouTube platform. So we quickly realized this sort of TV channel metaphor of our stage, and allowing artists to just join based on a schedule worked really well. And then we would we'd reset the stream key every day and distribute it again. And then we realized we had to build, we have a secret test Twitch channel that allows the artist to stream to before they go live, to check their setup too. So over the first few weeks, we figured out all of these little details too, as we decided to stick with Twitch. It was really, like a crash course for 5 or 6 of us to and then we created, specifically because we were working with other curators and the artists were just streaming themselves. We created, Alex especially created a series of instructional documents that we were handing out to people, and whoever the curator was, if I was putting a show together, I would be the point person to help artists kind of figure out, troubleshoot all that, schedule sound checks, all this kind of stuff. So we were doing so much work on the kind of behind the scenes, and our friends from Intermedia in Chicago created even nicer, more infographic type versions of the instructions and things like that. And all of this was evolving extremely quickly within a week or two. And that's a really interesting topic if we want to dig into that too. And I think Katherine, you sort of touched on it a little bit in your intro, just about artists. The artists now have to be their own sound engineers, their own lighting designers, their own camera operators, their own stage managers, right? Like they have to be everything, and all we can do is prepare them to be the best of all of those things up to that moment, right? Until they hit the streaming button, and then we're just sitting in the background dealing with our anxiety. But it's a really interesting way to think about performance art now, and how the artist has to play this role. And I think when we talk about which shows were the most successful versus some that maybe weren't,
it was really all about the artist sort of stepping back and realizing that this is a new medium. They can't just, like you said, Katherine, like open up their laptop and just do what they usually do and hope for the best, because people are hearing it differently. All their sound systems are different. What they're seeing is completely different than if you're on a stage, and they have to consider, things like where they place the camera and where they place lights and all of this to really kind of project whatever their intention is.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in on that too, like, and it's as you said, Katherine, I think at the beginning that, there were some people who immediately understood that there was no intention or idea that this was somehow a replacement or substitute for a live performance, because none of us ever thought of it like that. And so it was strange for people to be like, well, this isn't the same, and that's a problem. Like, we know it's not the same. No one's saying it's the same. No one wants it to be. That would be terrible. Like, that would be really boring. And we have no interest in sort of a weird copy of a live performance. And so I think that some people got that idea stuck in their head. Other people were like, cool, this is an opportunity to do some weird stuff with my computer in my house, which we thought was clearly the more successful approach generally,
Well, yeah,
well, actually, okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that, well, one thing I thought, like, and you were an inspiration for when we at Experimental Intermedia did our first online, virtual concert series, is you immediately had the chat, and I think the Twitch that has the weird aesthetic, it makes it stand out as something different, as opposed to, like, there's a lot of concerts out there that are like video only, and then it's like, Carol and I have talked about this often, then it's like bad TV. Whereas when you put it in that Twitch environment and you have the chat, and like some of the chat is like, yo, Fred, you're here from Berlin.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Yay, man, that's all, but it's just making people connect. And then it makes you forget about that fact that maybe it is bad TV. Some people I know who stream from at home, they didn't even have an adequate light. There was a whole time when even if you had like Amazon Prime, you could never get something in 48 hours. It took 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
Right.
So, so like for me, like part of the rethinking is like finding formats that don't remind us of old technologies, and say Twitch, I think it's also more appropriate for people who are maybe watching a concert on their iPad as they're cooking and babysitting, whereas if it's like kind of made like a TV production, then you kind of feel like you need to sit there. And I think part of our viewing experience, or part of the viewing reality nowadays, is that a lot of this stuff is done like in half attention, and that's okay too. It's another reality.
I think so. Some of my favorite, like most memorable shows are when the artists didn't have quality cameras or quality sound or quality lights, but they leaned into it. They knew it, and they leaned into it intentionally. Joe McPhee, for example, played a beautiful set of solo soprano sax, and he, if anybody knows him, he's not a very technical guy. It was very difficult to remotely talk him through figuring out how to go live from his, 7-year-old Android cell phone, right? But once we got it, and once he was able to connect, he played the most beautiful set of music, and the way that he framed it and the way that he would just like play his horn directly into the camera, it was something that you've never experienced before, right? And in a different context, someone might say, oh, that the sound was awful, the video was pixelated, it was choppy, but there was this intentionality behind it, and everybody was there with him, knowing the limits, and not expecting anything more, not expecting anything less. And it just had this power. It was beautiful.
And can I answer Adam's question in the chat? So Adam's asking, related to this discussion, how often artists, acts would interact with the audience during the show. So that really depended. There was some, what was I wish Ben was here because he organized that show. There was one artist who was essentially just creating their performance out of interactions with the chat. There was a sort of video that was being manipulated. I think of a train. There have been hundreds of these shows, and this was way back, I think, in April last year. So just even trying to remember this stuff is hard. But, and kind of talking with people, kind of responding to what they were doing. There were other people who were like, I hate that I can't see the audience and that I can't respond to them. This is really difficult and it's very alienating for me. And that, for sure, that is a almost traumatizing experience, I think, for a lot of artists. And some people it of course was based on what they were doing. So if someone was doing a more video-based performance, they were able to work with the chat to some extent. Other people, they're playing their instrument. And so reading a chat while playing your horn or a guitar or something, super difficult, maybe not something you can do.
Well, but I think one really lovely experience with that, though, is having a musician playing live, and then after their set, they're in the chat room, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like you're hanging out with them at the bar, like, hey man, that was an amazing set. Like, that was great. And then now let's watch the next set together.
Yeah. And you could have that conversation during the other set too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And we have our hangouts after each concert. So it's because we stream through actually Sarah Weaver's virtual venue, which is in Vimeo. Vimeo is actually excellent quality, but unfortunately it's very expensive. It's $1,000 a year, and for us, we only do like maximum 20 events, so it's not worth it. But luckily we can borrow someone, sometimes Sarah, sometimes the Friedman Gallery.
Oh, great.
But so then we post a separate link and say, like, come and meet us in our Zoom Pro account, and it's great. And we find also that's another thing that I find really that helps make it a real event, because or a special event, because then artists get to interact with the audience, and like they're super fans, they come and it's Zoom like this, and they could talk to them face to face.
And we do have the concert series option that I mentioned earlier that is, of course, now virtual. And one of the main features of that series is an interview with the musician. And so they'll play either live or present new pre-recorded material. And then we will do a live discussion with the program organizers, and keep the chat open for questions from the audience. So it'll be something like this, where we'll be on Zoom with the musician and the interviewer, but then the Zoom will be streamed to Twitch. And then someone like me in the background will be collecting questions coming up from Twitch and then sending them off to the interviewer. So there is this really wonderful real-time interaction with the artists. I think, and then, in terms of this like live interactive question too, Carol, you're asking about like ensemble performances. And one thing that keeps evolving for me in terms of my investigation in this technology is trying to learn about different methods for real-time collaboration, musical collaboration. And there are a lot of methods with varying degrees of technical difficulties. And what I've found is that, as from the standpoint of an engineer, my role is to teach and prepare musicians to be their own engineers in the time of their performance. So one of the things I do just internally in the background is decide how much I want to burden them with tech issues, right? Whether or not, and I have to be kind of intuitive about this, and I've sort of learned these skills through being an engineer in the studio over the years. I know that artists, especially musicians, do not want to be bogged down with technical issues, right? All of us as artists understand what sort of a creative momentum is, and it can be easily collapsed with a technical issue, and especially with music, playing live instruments, singing, performing, dancing. When you're the one in charge of it, it can all come crashing down really easily. So when it comes to virtual collaboration too, there's a lot of varying degrees of technical difficulty, and I've learned a lot of them to be able to communicate to the artist depending on how much they're used to this technology and how much they want to deal with, you know, things like virtual audio routing and different video sources, whether it be analog, digital, right? If they are using multiple pieces of software, just one, or just their phone or their laptop and their phone as an external camera. There's so many variations with this stuff. And I try to kind of design it for the musician and their current technical abilities. But we have, the question is, yes, we've done a lot of sort of, I mean, the answer to the question is yes, we've done a lot of live sort of collaborative ensemble performances. The one thing to note though, is that there is no such thing as real time when it comes to streaming something on the internet. There's always latency, there's always delay, and the extent of that is specifically correlated to the quality of the user's internet connection, essentially. So, you know, people ask me, what's the best software for real-time performance, you know, and it's like, well, there's a lot of great ones, but the speed in which it happens is 100% dependent on your internet connection. So we try to work with that, but that's an interesting sort of tangent too, because the music changes, right? Especially improvised music. We work a lot with with musicians who play improvised music. Something like playing synchronously with rhythm becomes very different when the person you're responding to is delayed, you know, 1.5 seconds or something. So the output of the music changes because of the limitation of the technology. And I find that really interesting, you know, that almost different genres are emerging out of these limitations.
Yeah, it's, if I could, oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was thinking too, I mean, this was something, just understanding the nature of the technical problems was also an interesting sort of journey for both us as curators and sort of programmers, but also artists and also the audience. I mean, there was a lot of conversation at the very beginning in the chat. People would be debating the better quality of YouTube versus Twitch, and be like, those things have nothing to do with it. It has to do with the people's internet connections. It's really not about one of these platforms or not. But we were thinking too in terms of kind of problem solving in a way. And as artists, people, that's what they're doing. They're sort of doing problem posing and problem solving, kind of to use that language. And it's a sort of a question of what kind of problems is the person up for solving at the moment. And, you know, sometimes some of those technical problems are they're not translatable into aesthetic problems that they want to work on. You know, they're just roadblocks. In other cases, people, and this isn't like a judgment, it's just sort of how it is for different artists and different moments and things like that. Other people have like, okay, here are these technical issues. How can I translate them into aesthetic issues or something that I can work with? And we had this, one of the funniest things, and everybody, we're all Zoom experts now, but there was in the video, there was a clip of our dear friend Paul Gialorenzo, who's one of the co-founders of Elastic Arts, amazing piano player. And a lot of things happened during Paul's set that night that were sort of unexpected. His son running in the middle of the set was the best one. But one of the other ones is that he was trying to do a live collaboration via Zoom. Now, everybody has learned, I think in the last year, that Zoom has a built-in noise gate, and you can turn it down, but you can't turn it off. So it was actually gating and clipping his performance in a way that sounded cool, but was clearly not what he intended, and he wasn't aware of it. Like, he had no idea how he was sounding. And so the first sort of set of attempts to do this over Zoom were, you know, pretty disastrous for a lot, not just because of latency, but because of, you know, they have these noise things, so you don't hear the, you know, the wind in the background or the people typing or dogs. I mean, it says like dogs barking, wind howling, you know, whatever in the drop-down menu for the gate there. So there were other cases where people just sort of embraced the latency, I think. There was a bit from Jamie Branch that was a series of people, I think, on Zoom that were in one room, and then that room was being broadcast by one person through OBS, but they were being very careful about kind of going two at a time and being super aware that there's just going to be latency and stuff. that also, I think, in turn speaks to another really important issue here, is that, frankly, the kind of music that I think everybody in this room and is interested in, and programs that we program, is a hell of a lot more conducive to this sort of thing, like experimental, improvised music, electronic music, things like that. There's a sort of adaptability to these kinds of problems that we saw a lot of friends who, doing sort of more rock or even live jazz oriented things had different problems to solve. And maybe, we're running into different issues that could be approached differently based on what the artists were interested in doing.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that. Well, two things. Yeah, one thing is like you, for example, for our concerts, we've been working with a wonderful sound engineer, Daniel Neumann. I don't know if you know him. And so he, every concert, will meet up with people and talk to them, discuss their project, and he'll find a different solution for each person. If they're not very technical, maybe it'll just be Zoom, and if they are, like, he's had like the sound in Jamulus and the video in this, and other people who just feel freaked out about it. He said, okay, like pre-record it, and he's helped them pre-record, and then we stream it in Korea. But I also want to speak to these technical limitations and obstacles for myself, and I know actually a bunch of people who decided to actually go more analog. So, for example, for myself, my live visuals practice was with an old version of Max and Jitter on an older computer with an older operating system. And my birthday came along, which was actually Friday.
Happy birthday.
Right after it started, and I decided to do a concert at my birthday, and I discovered, oh my God, I'm not connecting to Zoom. I can't. If I upgrade the operating system, my software doesn't work. So like that first concert, I ended up having we have a giant screen here. So I ended up projecting and shooting it with another camera and sending it back to Zoom. And then we started organizing with my collaborator, Ursula Scherer. We organized these live visuals based events. And I thought, like, I can't do this. This is too complicated, because that was like 4 cameras, 2 hours of setup, all these extra cables I bought, luckily were Amazon Prime, and I could get the cheap Chinese ones. And so I began like this new practice, which I call visual Foley, where a friend who was working on another project reminded me that I had these USB microscope cameras, and I just plugged them directly into Zoom, and I moved them around on different materials, different surfaces. And a lot of people are actually surprised to hear that all of that is, and it's like cold turkey and no effects. And I know other people in sound too who have decided, like, I can't deal with all of this, like a sound card and Soundflower and this and that. And they, even if their usual practice is maybe acoustic and electronics, but in the Zoom concerts, they prefer to be just acoustic and just to focus on a good mic, and that's it. And so it's actually, for some, maybe even getting them back into practices then that they haven't been into for a long time. So that's interesting too. So yeah, I think it's opening up all sorts of new practices in all sorts of ways for people.
Well, yeah, and I think we've over this past year, we've educated a lot of musicians, right, who haven't known about this sort of more advanced way to produce audio and to stream audio and to route it around their computer. So I think we've created a community of musicians that have a lot more skills around this stuff, which is really exciting. But I also agree with you, and we're also on board with that idea of really trying to simplify things as much as possible for the artists who feel more comfortable with it. And I agree, like, right now, like, I'm using an analog mixer to get my microphone into there and into the system, and I prefer to do it that way because it's just about the workflow. We had this really wonderful performance for our gala last year, which of course had to be 100% virtual, and we really wanted to invite artists who we knew had the sensibilities to be able to push the boundaries of this medium. We worked with a video artist named Sue C, and collaborated with Paul D. Murinas and Letitia Tsunami. and they did this wonderful trio where both Paul and Letitia were providing audio and sending it to Sue, who was receiving it through something called Audio Movers, mixing it down, processing it in Max, but was also receiving their video on like different old iPads and iPhones. And then she was filming it with cameras through like colorful lenses and different materials and cut tape and, you know, very old school analog visuals, but with webcams on top of iPads, you know, so avoiding any complex like video routing and setting, but just really simple, like, oh, you stream here, I'll pull it up on my iPad and then film it with my webcam and then work on the surface of that. And it was really powerful because I feel like we expect this to be really complex, or, you know, I think it's such a mystery, the way of interacting with this new medium. And I think that was a great example of demystifying it, approaching it in a really simple analog way, but still having a very powerful effect. Yeah.
I think one of the things that is often, I think, overlooked is that it's not just the technical limitations, there are such psychological limitations in performing this way. You know, you touched on the lack of crowd. And over the course of my first couple of performances, that was a really kind of devastating experience. I remained in complete isolation for about 9 months, the first 9 months of the pandemic. And after the streaming show, I mean, that's, for I think a lot of performers, it's the after show that is the thing. You know, like I love performing and I love being in the moment, but that the communication and the camaraderie, if you're improvising with other people, is to be with them. You know, you've just created this thing together. And by the time it got to actually that show with Paul DiLorenzo, I realized that I couldn't do another show where I like ended the show and then I was just alone in my house, that it was just too depressing, truly. So I tethered a second laptop to my phone internet so that I didn't interfere with my other internet. And I made a secret green room and invited, like, you know, 6 of my favorite people who would be on my guest list at my like fantasy show, my fantasy world. And they like sat in a little Zoom in the corner while I did my thing. And then at the end, I came back to it. And then Paul came in there too. And we were all, you know, like had our after show moment. And that was a real affirmation to the social need of this kind of, you know, music. Folks that are in experimentation and improvisation, there's so much about you know, being able to communicate with one another that's vital to that. You know, I think the socialization that we touched on with Twitch as a platform is such a big part of that, being successful, you know, knowing that you can show up on Friday night and you're going to run into people, you know. How else would you have had that? Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah, I love this idea of the green room, and it is such a really strange feeling to play a show to 100 people virtually and have this like energy and this excitement and this anxiety, and then it's like with one click it's just like over and you're all alone out of nowhere. It's very strange.
I will say though, oh sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted just a quick story. You know, we one of our curators of the quarantine concerts has been the gallery Corbett versus Dempsey, and they've John and Jim have put together really wonderful lineups for some of our shows, and one of them featured Thurston Moore. And I was talking to him, you know, getting him set up with the streaming, and he said, I don't think I've ever been as nervous to play a show before, you know. And this is a guy who's like played in front of you know, thousands of people in probably giant stadiums. So I thought that was really funny.
It's so much more intimate, you know. And I think, you know, the reason that there's kind of this lull, if you look back at the history of streaming online and you go, you know, all the way back to like, you know, the early YouTubes and previous to that when it wasn't Google, and what was happening with Ustream, and, you know, all the way into the, you know, insanity of We Live in Public, there's this lull between kind of Ustream dying and then Twitch rising, where, you know, folks wanted to, you know, in my opinion, you know, inside of it, they didn't want it to be synchronous anymore. They didn't want it to be streamed. The bandwidth wasn't there, but the expectation was there. So everybody needed to be HD, and we were pushing this perfectionism and pushing this high def and pushing this quality audio, and it was perfection, 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 quality, quality, quality. And the pandemic and the trauma and the grief of that, those walls just fell for so many people simultaneously. And the perfectionism, you know, a lot of folks were just like, move it out of the way and let me connect, let me get back to people, let me find people. And, you know, it's exciting to be nervous, you know, if you haven't been for a while. You know, I was talking to, says nervousness and excitement are the exact same thing being felt at different times. And I think that's such a true thing in this realm. And you know, one of my hopes in the future is that this kind of vulnerability continues, that we have this blended reality of asynchronous and synchronous experiences, because there are shows, you know, being Chicagoan, there are so many shows that are happening, you know, just in New York, where I'm like, oh my God, I want to be there. I want to see it. Where, you know, now these walls of streaming have been broken down to where the possibility of having, you know, both in-person and remote audiences will hopefully be part of that longer conversation, you know, where,
Yeah,
you
And oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh,
yeah, no, yeah, actually, for anyone who's come to any of our other meetings, like Phil, who, you know, he's old school experimental music, and he like grumbled, but we didn't have a choice to do the virtual series. And like after the first one we had in December, he was delighted with, you know, we had audience from all over the world. And like we do our concerts, we recorded through live stream, and then we post it the next day. And he gets emails from all over the world saying, I'm so grateful, I finally get to see some experimental intermedia concerts. Even if there was no pandemic, I couldn't travel to New York. And so now he's saying, you know, if we get back to normal times, we'll probably continue. We'll continue to record and post, and it's fantastic for everyone. And also it's fun to see audiences sometimes, to see that, oh, like, you know, we have this concert and maybe we only have an audience of 25, but, you know, one is in LA and one is in Mexico City, and you know, one is in Canada, and maybe, well, ours are 9 p.m. so we don't get that many people from Europe, but
and it brings us into that pollination of how do you create a culture and how do you create a community. You know, ESS, Alex, what's the capacity at ESS? We're like 25 people?
30, yeah, 25, 30.
I 30 people in that room sounds like a fire hazard to me. That is
I've seen a show, like a very loud, very intense show, the show that I talk about where I got queasy.
But yeah, we usually spill out into the hallway too, you know.
I was gonna say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, I was just saying, yeah, we're 70, including staff and help and everything. So it's also,
yeah,
much.
You know,
and that's, you know, how do you move a community forward? How do you move a movement forward? How do you move a practice forward? And starting to communicate and cross-pollinate with so many different presenters in other countries, you know, has definitely changed my practice and the way that I think about creating video, and the way that I want to break down even more of my own ideas of what the right piece is, of what the perfect, of how to see finished. You know, like that's one of those things that we become very, you know, myopic if we can only be in one place at a time. But one of the beautiful things of technology is that we can be in multiple places at multiple times. You know, you can experience these things in different countries all within the same evening. It's been great seeing a lot of kind of more old school thinking being broken down. We had a very interesting meeting kind of as the board with ESS talking about how much we were going to be streaming very early on. And we definitely had, you know, naysayers on the board being like, I just can't wait to get back to the real thing, and streaming growth. And, you know, my response very flippantly was, you know, what are we going to not do sign language now? We're going to not do, you know, all the different ways to access things. And having personal struggles with my health, you know, there's a lot of times where I'm just not well enough to put on pants to drive across town. So the ability to just be able to enjoy and be able to support, one of the things that is really interesting, I want to tie back into the points. I was given some very good points from Olivia, who's one of the directors at ESS, is that our donations, even in their grand number, are still $5 and $10 donations regularly coming in, repeating again and again, which is really unseen in kind of the nonprofit world. A lot of times, person-to-person donations happen just doing focus campaign, just during a very segmented time. And this has really shown us that there is a different methodology to creating sustainable income. And that this digital idea of virtualization is a bigger, larger idea than I think anyone was really ready for, because we've all pivoted our habits very quickly.
Yeah,
I
actually,
got my whole thought.
Actually, because we have our concerts online, like regularly, Poof will see, like, you just got a donation from PayPal, $10. So someone, went to our website, viewed something, and they said, oh, I'll donate. And yeah, and it's totally not the concert season. So.
And I think, like, looking to the future, just to go on the question that was asked too about, if there's like at least 3 groups of people that we're able to reach. People who have mobility issues, may not be able to come to the space, may not be able to get there by car, by train. At Elastic Arts, we have a tall staircase, which is a problem for us for a lot of reasons. Been working on installing a lift and so on. But people who are in other cities or countries, we have I've played in, say, Cleveland, Ohio a lot, and there's a really great, pretty small, tightly knit scene there. We get some of the Cleveland people at almost every show that we have, and it's nice because those folks can see what we're doing in Chicago, and I know that they're checking out stuff in New York, and we're able to see shows in New York, and and that's wonderful. And also just like people who just have to go to bed or go to work in the morning or go to school, so many. Our audience, I think, is with the experimental and sort of improvised music world, one of the best things about it is a huge diversity in the age range of people and the sort of places in people's lives that they are within this community. And so we have a lot of parents. We have a lot of people who just want to go to bed early and so wouldn't come. There's an average at Elastic, and I think, a little bit different from ESS in that way. We'd have events 5 nights a week, maybe 7. And I will always go to something on a Tuesday, but like a lot of people are like, I can't go to a show on a Tuesday night as good as it is. I have to get up, I have to go to school, I have to go to work, I have to put my kid to bed, whatever. And we have people who are able to then take part when they have to put their kid to bed or have to get up early in the morning and the like. And that, I think, is just not just, politically and otherwise, all that and the question of mobility are really important to think about, right? And again, you get, and I think that a lot of us, and Kim is obviously a very big advocate for this, and ESS was doing streaming already. At Elastic, one of our founders, Sam Lewis, has also been a major advocate for doing streaming for a long time, and he was working on this stuff for years as well. And part of the thing is like really trying to integrate the live and the sort of streaming together for all of the events. He raises interesting artistic and logistical problems. But the ability to, like, when things go back to normal, whatever that is, have the new normal include this in a way that folks can still see a show. I don't know what the numbers will be. I don't know if people will be like, I'm done with streaming forever. I'm so tired of it after this whole year. But I think eventually if someone's like, oh, there's a thing in this other city, or I just can't stay out that late, I can go catch one of the sets or something on my TV or on my computer or whatever. Like bring that into a part of what it is to hear music, I think is a really, really exciting possibility. And I think we're all hoping that that's what happens.
But also for musicians with mobility, like Phil is 87, it's getting harder and harder for him to stream. And there was an incident a few years ago where he was told not to travel by his doctor. And so he suggested to the venue where he was going, which is Florida, I think, that, he could send his stuff and join by Skype. And they said, like, no way. And now I think that would, because of this, it's going to make it acceptable.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think
there's a lot of people there who have
it's
a hard time traveling
the new
for various-
normal.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see Phil no matter what. You know,
Yeah,
if,
right?
if it's
Like,
like,
I'll Skype
if it's
him in
nothing
here,
or
you
a
know?
Skype, like give me the Skype. Come on.
Yeah, I think. Well, and on that note too, the artists can bring like their entire collection of instruments, right? They don't have to like cart it to the show. So we've had these like beautiful concerts with like, you know, percussionists playing like huge like marimbas, you know, that they wouldn't travel with, or, you know, entire collections of synthesizers and keyboards, like things that artists wouldn't be able to just, you know, carry in an Uber or whatnot to a show, and they have be able to play from their studio in a place where they're comfortable creating with all their tools at their fingertips. That's really wonderful too.
And yeah, while we're here, we're getting, well, we're almost an hour and a half in. Just wondering if any of our attendees have any questions or comments, or even just want to kind of veer and discuss technical issues or something, which, you know, we're a good group of people with technical knowledge to share. So don't be shy. Carol, your mic is off.
Yes, always have a question. Okay, so from what I understand, you have, let's say you program 5 artists in an hour. So your process is you send each artist your stream key, and then you text them, and they just hit the start button, and you've done some training in OBS, I assume, right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We've given so many OBS trainings.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, some people are using their cell phones too. So there's a handful of apps that can connect to RTMP keys too. But yeah, we'll start like a WhatsApp thread with the, which yeah, WhatsApp tends to be better. We've actually had trouble doing group texts when like iOS messages and like non-iOS messages are combined. You don't get them right away. But anyway, WhatsApp thread is what we suggest, and everyone's on it. And so there's like a stage manager who's basically queuing the artists to go. And that's pretty much it. They hit their start streaming, and, you know, sometimes there's the moments where they don't show up, and then you have to scramble and do some troubleshooting in real time. But the wonderful thing I think about this landscape right now is that the audience is very forgiving with technical issues, like extremely forgiving with technical issues. And we mentioned that before, but it's amazing how active the chat rooms get when an artist can't connect, and we're in the background on a call with them trying to, you know, figure things out. And we have someone on the crew manning the chat saying, hang tight, you know, we're helping so-and-so out with their connection issues. And then everyone's like a part of it, you know, and they talk about it, and they talk about their day too. It's wonderful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We've
There's
only
a lot
done
of cheering on, which is so nice. You know?
We've only done
you
single
somebody-
single artists so far. So I was curious how you did that.
Yeah, and there's only
do
a
they
little.
have a line check or yeah.
We do usually a day before, you know, at least a day before. Like I think I mentioned, we have like a secret Twitch page that's our like test channel. So it's the same exact way in which they'll eventually connect to the main show, just with a different stream key. So we do sound checks on Twitch, but on a hidden channel that nobody knows about. And then they can essentially, all they need to do is just swap the new stream key, and then they're ready to go.
Which I should add to the kind of weird short clip detritus of people being confused and figuring things out that gets like kind of archived on that test channel is like my favorite artistic byproduct of this entire year. I know a lot of it gets deleted after it just gets auto deleted off Twitch, but it's really beautiful.
Yeah,
It's
we should be
amazing.
saving more of that.
I went to sound check for something, and somebody forgot to turn off, and they were just doing their laundry. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I could watch this dude fold his clothes. Like, this is so weird and intimate. Like,
and
strange.
I've been hearing that from you know, places also, like people who work like whatever, they're programmers or something, and they have a lot of meetings all day. And I've been hearing they forget to turn their Zoom off.
Yeah.
There they are.
Dangerous.
On the note of some technical issues that we've come across, there's also been moments of artists playing their entire set but not actually being live.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which we try really hard to avoid. But, again, I mentioned this idea of, the creative momentum. They're just in their headspace. So, they get that text and they say, go live, and they press the button, or maybe they press the wrong button and they start playing, and then they're not looking at their phone anymore, and nobody can get a hold of them. And that's happened a couple times, but these are the funny things that can happen in this interface.
People have the sound off and somebody be trying to text them, but they have their phone off, and everybody's like scrambling, like, do you know their roommate? Somebody call their roommate. And then you see the roommate come in and the person's like, oh shit. And then like, that's definitely happened. Like we'll have to like kind of, and it's interesting because that says something about the network and the kind of community and the organization of people, is that like somebody has to like, I know their sister or something, I'll get them to come in.
Yeah.
But we've found, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things, working in video and not audio that I've had some limited success with has been just going super basic. And if I'm collaborating with somebody who's just miking the room and they're not taking a line in for their stream, having them call me on the phone. So instead of me watching the stream and then reacting, I'm getting the lower latency phone feed, and we're syncing up at least like closer together, which has been an interesting thing to try. Like I don't think there's, without a lot of very expensive equipment and locking down time code, there isn't a real perfect way to do it.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, it is interesting though how many people are coming round. That I know so many people who, like last spring, we started with Phil being part of virtual events, like also by April, by April. But when we'd mention to some people, a lot would be saying like, oh no, I don't do online concerts. My music is about the space, etc. And now, and so like the first virtual concert series we did was in December. And since we only do about 20 a year, a lot of people who are scheduled, they're scheduled a year or two before, so like when Phil went down the list, a lot of people were in December, they were said no, I rather wait, I rather not do it, I rather wait to be live, and by March like people who had said that, there was I'll do it, and then some of them it's pushing them exactly like what we talked about, to explore new things. Like some people have like never performed with video, and because they thought it would be boring to just see them playing something, they've either worked on their own video or collaborated with someone, and that's also really beautiful too, and then they're happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a lot of people, you're seeing their slip show, you're seeing them make off, there's a lot of musicians that that I love and that I've worked with, where I've been just completely like, yo, how do you not know about camera angles? Like, you are just one of the most prolific musicians, but this is like such a new thing. And watching the evolution over the last year has been, I think, really incredible. Being such a kind of steeped in technology person and working with so many folks that are such classic analog musicians, and acoustic musicians, it's been awesome to see this bridge getting built of understanding. They don't have to understand how it works to understand what you can do with it, and I think that's been a really interesting change. Where we go from here is kind of this wild frontier of a very new reality.
I think
But we do find that on our end that it's a lot more exhausting to do the virtual concerts than the in-person concerts. We know them by heart, but here, like, usually we have like 4 computers going, plus if there's a technical problem, someone might phone. So usually I have one for the chat, one to monitor, then there's another computer for our like posting Zoom, and so, like, for example, Phil and I have recently both been vaccinated, and at one point someone said, oh, I'll come and hang out with you during a concert, who was also, I said, no, not during the concert, we're running back.
You got to put them to work.
Yeah,
You know, that's
whereas when
4
we
jobs.
are in-person concerts, it's easy. And also, you know, you make a mistake. Like another example I was giving somewhere recently, every year I do this, I curate this one program that's called Screen Compositions, and it's about intersections of a moving image and sound music. And so people send me in videos. And this year, since it's virtual, and usually the way I do it, because I find that if you play a whole bunch of shorts with no breaks in between, it becomes like one big soup for everyone. So usually when I do it in person, I'll say, okay, and the next piece is by Kim Alpert. If you're in the room, I'll say, do you want to say anything? So I decided I would do little intros. I invited people to do intros if they wanted, and I do little intros. So there was like 5 people who said, no, I don't want to say anything. So I had to introduce them. And it took me an hour. So I just recorded myself on Zoom because I kept making mistakes. And it's this whole other world, because I feel, okay, I'm committing this. And like these people are in Greece, in France, in Canada, whatever. And if I screw up their name, if I screw up the title, you know, it's like, it's not nice, you know. Whereas if I was in the room, you know, I would say Kim Albert and you'd say Alpert, and I'd say, oh, I'm sorry, I mean Alpert, you know, and it would be just as easy. And this took an hour and a half of my time. I was thinking, like, I can't believe this is taking so much time, you know. And all of these things, like when for us, we have like links that go to the Zoom hang or stuff like that. Now, the first series we did, we had both on the same page, and everyone was going to the wrong link. And saying, like, where's the concert? Did you notice, like, the first link was the concert? So we've stopped putting and we put it only on the concert page. And there's all these things to think of, and you know, you just because you're connecting at a distance. So there's so
it's one of the things that I'm very curious, you know, when the world is open, how that's going to affect the interaction between back of house and front of house in performance venues. You know, being a video performer, I've had a very odd experience being both a performer and also being looked at as technical staff. And, you know, all of those experiences haven't been, you know, super awesome. But I think there is a pretty bigger, wider understanding now by musicians and performers that all those folks that are working backstage, all those folks that are, you know, part of that production, the critical need for them, because in their absence, you look different and you sound different. And it is, you know, 10, 20 jobs, all those things that you're, you know, that you're talking about. And I think it also creates another interesting vehicle for employment in the arts. You know, organizations like ours talk about, you know, do we need a moderator? I remember us, you know, just being like, oh, do we need to find people to be chat moderators and to do more online conversations and things like that? And that, you know, as folks are starting out and finding their voice and working their practice, you know, these are all kind of vehicles for sustainability to get more experience in different aspects of the performing arts. We have more questions in the chat. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so just to answer, just to piggyback off what Kim was saying, and also just there's a question about the monitoring and sound checking strategies, but I did want to ask about the live streaming engineers thing, because this is or say something about that, because this is a conversation we're having. I know you guys are having it at ESS, we're having it at Elastic, and we're talking again about integrating streaming just into the standard programming, especially since, frankly, like a lot of other venues and organizations, we've invested money in the streaming stuff now. We've purchased, you know, multiple cameras and things like that, and the like. So we want to be using them. And and this has been a very concrete conversation. Now, I've done shows where I'm running sound and handling the door and basically the only person in the venue, and that's really, really hard. And so having at least 2 people is you know, even though we're a small space and so on, can be really difficult. But to add in kind of monitoring the streaming stuff, and specifically monitoring the chat, like it is just the case that someone has to moderate the chat. Bad things happen in unmoderated chats. That's just a rule, a universal rule.
That shirt.
Yeah, I mean, just awful things. I mean, just like really awful things happen.
We've had some trolls. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think,
just
sorry, I
having
guess
someone whose job that is seems to be
totally
very, very important.
I mean, I think, you know, going back to the concept of that, this is the new venue, right? And how do we staff the venue? I think all those things apply. But to answer Adam's question, I think, Adam, I realized that we were working together a little bit on the Emory thing, and the one thing we suggested that I'm not sure worked out in the end, but what I have found, if the musicians are up for the challenge of the troubleshooting for real-time virtual performance, is to actually use Zoom as the source that the musicians monitor each other and see each other through. It's the one accessible software that is the most real-time because of how it compresses the video and the audio. So there's always, in internet streaming land, you either have like high quality and a lot of latency, or very low quality and low latency. And it's finding what that balance is. Zoom is very low quality, very low latency. And what we have found is that we get musicians on Zoom to collaborate and play with each other, but the audio and the video in Zoom is primarily for monitoring. And then what they do is that in parallel, they send a higher quality audio stream through a different platform. So one that we've used is called Audio Movers, which is a plugin that you can put into a DAW and broadcast it to a receive version of a plugin that an engineer can receive and then mix. So then the engineer can receive the high quality audio that's being sent in parallel with the Zoom audio, but is delayed. And then the engineer can then marry that back to the video and broadcast it. So the musicians are only hearing and seeing Zoom, and then the engineer is receiving in parallel the high quality audio and presenting that to the audience. So it's kind of a double layered thing that's happening together. So this is kind of one solution. There's a couple different ways to also stream high quality audio. We have used, like, for example, Discord is a really cool solution. People can join like an audio chat room and actually play sound with each other in there, and it's pretty high quality, but it's very delayed. So we've done like Zoom in parallel as a monitor, but send through Discord simultaneously. The challenge, like I was saying before, though, is that the musicians have to be up for some virtual audio routing, like learning Black Hole, Soundflower, Loopback, learning how to route audio from pieces of software internally on their systems. That's a big wall, I think, for a lot of musicians, or a big roadblock. And simultaneously, like, they can also have a higher quality camera too on top of Zoom, and then send that through a different platform. There are some really cool interfaces that work in this way that have been kind of in development. And one, let me pull it up here and I'll put it in the chat. But one's called Live Lab. Developed by Culture Hub.
Culture Hub, yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of this like hybrid web-based Zoom kind of interface, but for performance and virtual collaboration. There definitely is delay, but you can, increase or decrease the quality in different ways, and you can like do sort of pop-out windows of different videos. So I think what they do is they make it with the intention of bringing musicians in together to be able to collaborate, and then an engineer being able to then capture multiple feeds and then feed it back out to a stream through like window capture on OBS. There's some downsides to that. At the same time, it's not as real time as Zoom. So this sort of Zoom hybrid thing is also a good thing. But I think your other question about is it better for the artist to handle those roles or the engineer? Like in this context, I think that these like setups that I'm describing definitely require an engineer. But again, it's this sacrifice of quality, latency, of course, like layers of streaming too, right? We have like, if it's just my video camera streaming to Twitch, my audio streaming to Twitch, that's the best quality we can get, right? But if it like then goes through another filter of then going to the engineer's house across the country, capture and then stream to Twitch, compression adds up, noise adds up. delay adds up, all of these things. So I think the more layers of sending and receiving, I think the quality gets reduced here and there. But again, I think, like I said before too, it's like so much of my role is determining what the best tools are depending on the artist and depending on what sort of technology they're comfortable with and how I sort of imagine it would interfere with their creative momentum too. Yeah.
I want to take a moment about this question because I think it's such an interesting one. Do you think eventually, as the medium develops, we will need live streaming engineers? It's such, you know, coming from a technical background, it's one of those really great questions because I want as many engineers to support what I'm doing for everything. I want them. You know, I don't need them, but I want them. You know, like I want a projectionist. I want someone to color balance me. I want, you know. I want someone to check to make sure the electricity in the building is all right. But at the same time, like I don't need them. I can come with my own projector. I can pop it up. I can build my own screen. You know, it's important to me to be able to, you know, conceptualize within something that I can contain and let that authenticity be able to scale up so that, you know, if I'm at the Walker, well, I have a whole team of people and there's camera and, you know, like there's people running different places that are part of that. And I think that's the same thing within streaming. You know, you should be able to, as an artist, know enough to be able to take care of yourself and be able to provide what you need to like achieve your idea moving out into the world. But I don't think that it'll ever be a make or break, you know, because there are, you know, to go back to, you know, Joe McPhee streaming from the Batcave in the basement, you know, I don't need that to be in 4K for me to love it. I love it because it's Joe. I love it because it's the most authentic moment of him within the context of this time and the context of technology to be expressive inside of digital. So there is kind of this moving target, you know, at the same time, you know, they've been having, you know, live streaming engineers in television forever, you know, so that's not like it's not a new thing. Where I went to university, there's an entire degree of show production and touring that's been doing, you know, live streaming and live video audio capture and performance for live events. And they do the WWE wrestling Friday nights out of their training facility at the school, because that's, you know, as you scale up a production, it has to be a collaboration.
What I'm finding, I'm like, there's several audio engineers we've worked with who are people who usually work at Issue, Roulette, different places, and so they're becoming streaming engineers. And like if we're doing it, if we use them, they'll ask to say streaming engineer. But a lot of them more and more are saying like they don't find it as interesting as being audio engineers. So I think it's like a different field, and like
it is,
they're all grateful
IT.
because they fell into it and they're grateful, they have work, they're paid. But
yeah,
like Daniel's been telling me that then Bob Belleroux, like they were at one point, Daniel had Bob subbing, and like so we had like a Zoom
where the I don't really know how to put it, but there's this like level of quality and production that I think is not interesting in this context, at least for this time. And I've watched some streams, and I've even been a part of producing some that have high quality camera angles, multiple switching fades, and everything's mic'd, and it just looks beautiful. And it's live, but it's like, it's not as interesting, right? We're not in the Batcave with Joe McPhee seeing his home and looking right at it. Yeah.
I've been finding that like that's been Roulette's approach, and they also they deliberately have decided not to have a chat. So for example, when Phil did his 6-hour solstice concert on December 21st, we requested a chat, and we were the only ones who had it, and like all the people were there loved the chat, you know, but they have like this TV approach. But my argument about that, and it's beautiful, it's beautifully done, and they have like that Black Magic mixer and everything. but I'm finding that it's not appropriate for how I'm watching it. I'm watching it on my little Air MacBook, you know, that I'm carrying around the space sometimes while I'm doing something else. I'm not watching it on a big, large screen television, comfortably seated in an armchair, which then it would be great. But
right.
It's like that's transposing the television medium to this reality, which that's also something that I find really important to rethink. And I feel really horrible saying it because we love roulette. We love that they're supporting artists. They're paying.
Yeah.
They're
It's who they are, right?
Yeah,
So
they're doing a job with their you know, with their heart, and you know, but I find that I'm not like when I go to the roulette concerts, I don't want to watch. I'll turn I'll put the music in the PA and I listen and I don't watch. I don't want to watch.
I think that there's another side to this, which I think is part of what Kim was speaking to as well. And like, you have to be attentive to the new dynamics of the audience. And we talked about this a bit already, but sort of making I don't know, I sort of really, there's some aesthetic things about the chat on Twitch that I don't like. I think that the emojis are weird and all that other stuff, but people love it. And so if I'm a programmer and like part of what I'm doing in my work is to create an experience for the audience, I need to listen to what the audience wants and sort of remember who I'm doing it for. And I understand wanting to have a certain aesthetic and so on that we're presenting, but at the same time, just like people love it, you know, they really like to talk to each other and they really like to, and look, there have been times where we've had to turn the chat off. We've had to moderate people. Twitch has a really funny but very useful emoji only chat feature where we've turned that on. And there have been moments say where artists have said, look, can you just turn the chat off for my set? We've respected that as well. But like, there's no answer here about what's the best. And I think sometimes the idea that, it should be like TV or it should be like whatever, forgets that people are just experiencing this in completely different ways. I've watched these shows on my phone at the park while walking my dog. I've watched them on my giant TV with my nice sound system. I've watched them on my computer. And that's just, you know, me. So the amount of, you have 100 people, like they're experiencing it in all these different ways. And I think trying to be attentive to that it's not just a important challenge. It's actually a really exciting and interesting one, like a really cool problem to think about. And
it's its own job. You know, that digital strategy piece of taking time for your audience, who your users are, you know, I think that has been
I'll be right back.
Such a eye-opening. Alex is getting a delivery of equipment, you guys. We have to grill him on what is in the box when he gets
I really
back.
want to know what's in the box.
Right? Like, I really want to know what's in that box. But, you know, I think that's one of those things that in the evolution of the internet, in the evolution of interactive, it moves so much faster than any of us. And we as a culture of how we use a thing are dictating, you know, what we want, while, you know, all of the folks that own platforms and try to monetize them are trying to move our behavior in the way that is fit to who they're beholden to, whether it's, you know, their funders or their advertisers or things like that. And, you know, internet and streaming specifically, so much more than television, though television is kind of dead and is just streaming as well, is a one-to-one experience. You know, you're in a place alone experiencing with other people and experiencing media. You know, and that's one of the things, like a lot of people are, you know, they're thinking they're on the big screen TV because that's what they wish, right? They wish everybody watching it on a beautiful PA and, you know, on this beautiful big monitor, but at the end of the day, it's usually, you know, just their phone and a shitty pair of headphones. And that's.
But you know, like saying what you do or what we do, it gives people the possibility of both. Like we put the Vimeo live stream on our webpage, and the chat is a separate box. And if you don't want to, if you want to watch it on your beautiful TV, you just
you can always turn it off
on the video, and the chat is off. Same with you with Twitch. So I kind of I kind of feel it would be in the interest of these places who don't like chat to have it anyway, and it's so easy not to use it.
even though I'm a big advocate of chat, I mean, I'm also of the age where I grew up with like AOL Instant Messenger. So like, I just love chat, like I'm into it. I understand it. You know, I work with Constellation, which is another club in Chicago, and they're no chat, all YouTube, but that speaks to the style of their presentation as a venue. It speaks to the brand of who they are as a venue. And it is very authentic to what their voice is. That's, you know, they want it to have a very contained, very specific look and feel and consistent look and feel. And when you start, you know, involving all different parts to change that. So it's, I didn't know that about Roulette, but I'm not surprised to hear that because they have a very similar kind of, you know, an aesthetic that is very standardized, and they have, you know, done a lot to maintain the authority of being able to put out work consistently in that way. Whether or not I like it in that way, that's a me thing, you know. I'm not going to get every website to act the way I want all the time.
I don't know.
Okay, Alex, what was in the box?
Oh,
what was in the box?
This is actually
What's in that box?
Appropriate. So sorry, I'm out of breath because I was just like running up the stairs too.
Also, this is the best finale. The fact that there's 10 minutes left and the arrival of new gear happened is so perfect.
Yeah, so the next step for streaming for ESS is we actually received a really wonderful grant specifically for building a mobile live streaming rig that will allow us to bring to other organizations, stream from the middle of a park, go to the lake shore, work with artists anywhere in Chicago, and have the ability to do multi-channel audio, multi-camera, hotspot enabled live streaming from anywhere. So we feel like that this is kind of like the next step in this, where, you know, we can start to sort of have these hybrid gatherings, still present quality sound and video to an audience, produce shows anywhere in the city, even outdoors without power or Wi-Fi. So that's what also just
now
arrived
all
at my
you
door.
need is a dedicated van.
Exactly. I know, we've been thinking about it. I know Kim already has an idea for how to decorate
With
it.
a generator and
Yeah.
I'm ready to wrap that van. Let me tell you, I'm like, let's wrap it.
Yeah.
That's what they did. Like in the 60s, they had like video buses that would take video to small. In Canada, they did it small communities.
Yeah.
Anna in the chat asked if you could talk about the cost of the mobile rig.
Yeah. I mean, so the grant that we received was substantial. So we were able to purchase the best of the best, which we're very lucky to do. And, you know, of course, the way grants work is this money has to go to that. So to spend all of it, that allowed us to buy the best of the best. So we're talking for the whole rig, 2 cameras, multi-channel audio, 8 channels of audio, 8 microphones, all the things that go along with it. We're talking, you know, roughly $25,000 of equipment. But this stuff can get accomplished too with cell phones and, you know, data plans you already have attached to your cell phones. Things like inexpensive, like Blackmagic switchers that are a couple $100, battery backups that are a couple $100, you know, Zoom field recorders, things like that. You could put an equivalent kit together, I think, for a couple $1,000s too. So we were just lucky enough to be able to buy like the best of the best things that are used for, you know, things like audio recorders that are used for, you know, Hollywood productions and things like that, you know, and the best microphones and stands and bags and Pelican cases and the things, the carts you need to put it all on and roll it on, you know, all the little pieces. So yeah, there's, you know, like anything in the audio world, it's like you can buy a microphone for $10, you can buy a microphone for $10,000. Yeah.
Carol, we maybe should wrap up.
Yes, I was thinking that myself. Yeah, it's getting.
Thank you guys so much for having us. This has been a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It
It
was
was
wonderful to talk to you all. Yeah.
And to our audience who's there, we think this is probably going to be the last one for a while, unless we figure out that we can do another one, but then you're all on our mailing list, I think. And if not, you could send an email to Harvestworks to ask to be put on their newsletter, and then you would get information about that. Otherwise, hopefully we'll be back by the fall or something, and then there might be all these new developments. Maybe we're going to have to invite you all over again to talk about mobile streaming production, you know.
Yeah, we would love to.
Sure,
we would love to.
And you'll have been doing it all summer, so you'll have a whole new little video to show us.
Yeah, we already have a lot of interest. You know, we've been kind of spreading the word, even though the kit isn't complete yet, and so we'll have a lot to do this summer, hopefully. Yeah.
And is there like of the videos you showed or the other document, is that online somewhere? Is it just at the ESS website? Or
yeah, actually, the I'll throw it in the chat right now. The ESS YouTube is where we archive all of this.
Okay, that would be great to because we have a links page associated to this.
Great. Yeah, this is our YouTube channel. So everything we stream to Twitch, we archive it on YouTube. Twitch only keeps videos up for like a week or two, and then so we translate it all over to YouTube and keep a full running archive. So you'll also see our upcoming live streams that we do specifically on YouTube there, and then yeah, pretty much every quarantine concert, I think.
You know, I wanted to thank you for participating. You know, we have we've worked with Lou and we've worked with Beth Bradfish, and we've worked with Sandra. So it was, you know, and I noticed you were founded in 86. We were founded in 77. So really there's a lot of shared history between the two organizations. And, you know, it's just nice that we were able to connect finally.
Yeah.
So similar.
Let's
great.
collaborate more in the future. We're definitely down. Thank you.